Welcome, welcome, folks. This is Hurricane Hub Live. It is Thursday, August the 14th, streaming live on 13 News Now Plus. Also, a shout out to our YouTube viewers this evening. We appreciate your content and your input to our videos that we produce here every night, every weeknight at 8 p.m. here on 13 News Now Plus. Now, tonight on HHL, we've got a lot to talk about again. We've got Erin still out there in the Atlantic, which is getting awfully close to becoming the first hurricane of the season. And now that the Hurricane Hunter aircraft is flying through the storm recon missions, well, now we're getting the intermediate advisory. So we've got brand new data that just came down from the NHC at 8 o'clock, and we'll get another track update at 11 o'clock. So we'll be back onto the 8 updates daily from the National Hurricane Center. As I mentioned, the first recon flight, a NOAA aircraft is currently in the storm right now. Miss Piggy is what it's called. Now, model outliers are still there. They remain in place. There's always going to be model outliers, but confidence is increasing in the track that right now looks highly likely between Bermuda, west of Bermuda, and east of the eastern seaboard, kind of threading the needle going up the center there. I don't expect Erin to make a landfall, meaning the center of Erin passing over land, intersecting with land. Don't think that's going to happen. It might be a close call for Bermuda, but as you know, it's very hard to get a landfall on Bermuda. Very small island, very large ocean. So we'll continue to watch that. And then 98L that we first talked about last night in the southern Gulf, Bay of Campeche. Odds for that quickly becoming our next named storm, Fernand, have actually jumped considerably today, and we'll touch on that at the end of this video. All right, let's start off with Erin. Satellite imagery, brand new update came down at 8 o'clock. We're now up to 70-mile-per-hour winds. That's a jump from yesterday when we were at 50 to 70 today. And you can see it's definitely getting its act together. A closer inspection here on infrared satellite imagery. Looking at the temperatures of the cloud tops, colder cloud tops, stronger thunderstorm activity. We can see we have colder cloud tops in the whites and pinks completely surrounding the core of Erin right now. And over the last 12 hours is the run of that. You can see it's really progressing towards an intensification stage, and it's moving into a much more favorable environment. It's not completely ideal at this moment in time. We still have a little bit of wind shear that's evident coming in from the north and east. You can see the lower level part, western part of the storm, eastern part of the storm getting exposed at the lower levels, and some of that convection getting displaced. So it's slightly tilted. You need that storm to sit up completely vertical to ventilate properly, good posture, and is able to have some inflow at the surface and outflow aloft. We are starting to get some indications of what we call central dense overcast. And you can see that kind of clouding on up, looking a little milky on the top there. That's indicative of the strong thunderstorm activity here with now tropical storm borderline Hurricane Erin. Now switching it up again over to water vapor imagery. We had talked about how it was completely surrounded pretty much for its entire lifetime thus far by very dry air. And it still is, but notice the moisture levels in the mid-levels are really increasing, completely surrounding the storm. There's still plenty of dry air lurking on off towards the west, and you can see that's a bit eroding as it builds off westwards here in the last couple of hours here. And, you know, it may, as it intensifies, especially once it becomes a major hurricane later on into the weekend, there's always the potential that it can stutter along and ingest some of that dry air, and that could halt intensification if in fact that happens. It happens a lot with storms, but it doesn't happen all the time. All right, here's the first recon mission. Remember yesterday they were staging Hurricane Hunter, U.S. Air Force Reserve 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron coming out of Keesler, and then NOAA aircraft as well. They were staging them out at St. Croix yesterday, and now they're launching missions. So this is the first one. Currently in the storm, did one pass through the core, about to do a secondary pass. Found some flight level wind speeds of 78 miles per hour. Again, that's flight level, it's not down to the surface, but they did deem it necessary to up the winds here to 70 miles per hour based on some of that observations from the NOAA aircraft there. Still, though, moving to the west, due west at 17 miles per hour. Now, when we look at it on latitude and longitude here, it has gained a little bit of latitude over the last 24 hours. Yesterday, I believe at 16.3 degrees north. Now it's gained about a half a degree. Okay, so it's not really turning west-northwest yet. It is still anticipated that that happens in the short term. But as of right now, still a due west trajectory, and pressure still sitting at 999. So not all that deep of a system. But again, it's building into conducive environmental conditions. Warm waters, okay? Everything that's shaded in red here is 80-degree sea surface temperatures or warmer. Now, once you get into this deeper, darker reds, you're talking about 81, 82. The really dark red's maroon shading here, which is eventually where the storm ends up to the west of Bermuda. You're talking 85, 86, 87 degree waters that's just further enhanced by the Gulf Stream coming up from the south there. But there's the forecast track. Warm waters now, not just warm waters on the surface. We talked about this a little yesterday and again on Tuesday. It's moving into very deep warm waters. The ocean heat content is there, high octane waters out ahead of it, and that's warm water, at least 80 degrees or so, extending down to a depth. And why that's important is because when you get a major hurricane or even a hurricane, you start to blow the winds across the surface of the ocean and really mix it up. It's called upwelling. And upwelling tends to replace the warmer waters at the surface with cooler waters from the depths. And when you get the warm water that extends quite deep, you're just kind of replacing the warm water at the surface with more warm water. So it's almost an endless fuel source here. And you can see it's moving into some very warm, deep waters. Not as warm and deep as the Caribbean. I mean, it's just jet fuel out here. And we may get some storms out there later in the season. But for now, it'll steer clear of the Caribbean and likely steer clear of the Leeward Islands as well. So here's the brand new track. Again, remember, this is the 5 o'clock advisory track. We'll get an update to the track at 11, and then at 5 a.m. tomorrow and 11 a.m. tomorrow. Intermediate advisories in between those are going to came our way at 8 o'clock. That's the data you're seeing there. And then again, 2 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., 8 p.m. tomorrow. So 8 advisories throughout the day. Here's the forecast track. Not really many changes to this overall. We're not seeing drastic swings, especially on the tail end of things, when historically the uncertainty is highest, and that's why the lobe is much larger in size. Category 3 anticipated here at Tuesday afternoon, 125 mile per hour winds. Notice it scoots by just to the northeast of Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti. Scoots by to the east northeast of the Bahamas, the cone completely outside of there. And then it takes that turn to the northwest and eventually due north. Now, this cone only extends out 5 days. Of course, we want to know what may happen as it moves to the north. Is it a threat to the eastern seaboard? I'm going to show you what the computer models are showing here in just a second. But with the 5 o'clock advisory, they did issue their first round of tropical alerts. We've got tropical storm watches that are up for parts of the northern Leeward Islands. Anguilla, Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, all under tropical storm watches, meaning the possibility is there over the next 36 to 48 hours or so of seeing tropical storm force winds. If the track adjusts farther to the south, we may see that upgraded to a tropical storm warning. All right, again, here's a return to the cone. Here's how it looks on all the hurricane models, okay? All of these coming, pretty much all of these, coming within the cone. We've got a few outliers off to the east, and we've got a few outliers on the far south, southwestern portion of the cone here. The majority of which, tightly clustered, due north and then northeast. Here's Bermuda. Now, I'm saying that there's not going to there probably won't be a landfall, okay? But if there's an area that's going to see the worst of what Erin may bring, it will be Bermuda. Because when you get a storm passing by west of Bermuda, you are then on the eastern side of the storm, east of the center. The dirty side is what we call it. That's where you're going to find the strongest of the winds, the heaviest of the rain. And if it's making a landfall, you're going to see some of the worst storm surge. Because you've got not only the forward speed, but you've also got the wind speed generated by the storm. So it kind of adds on to it as it builds in that direction. So if it passes by to the west of Bermuda, Bermuda's in for a bit of a rough go, probably for about 12 to 18 hours worth of time, because at that point it's also going to be accelerating. So it won't be a long-term thing. This could change. If it passes by to the east of Bermuda, for some reason it adjusts way out to the east, we could see not as bad conditions for Bermuda, okay? Now, in terms of impacts for the eastern seaboard, with a track like this, you're talking indirect impacts here, okay? This is where the storm center will be. As it gains latitude, it's also going to be expanding. So it will be breezy along the coast of the U.S., east coast of the U.S. Rip current risk will be very high, pretty much all the way from Jacksonville all the way up to southern New Jersey. And then you're going to have rough surf as well. High winds could be generating waves up to 10 to 12 to 15 feet high. And that could lead to some coastal erosion. And I really hone in on that part because you got the Outer Banks. And you get some rough seas there, and you've got the houses right on the water there, and you could lose some of those homes, even if the storm is hundreds of miles off to the east. All right, now we looked at the hurricane models. Now how about the ensemble plots of our GFS and of the European? Europeans in red, GFS in yellow. Now these are ensembles, meaning that we're running the GFS and the Euro dozens of times and tweaking it initially to get a different outcome. So you see the spread here. Now a couple of the GFS ensembles are very, very close. They move through the Bahamas and then pretty much scrape along the east coast of Florida. These are outliers. Look at the majority of all these ensemble plots. Keep it well offshore. There's even a few Euro ensemble members that do take it up into eastern North Carolina, but there's like one there. So the majority of which are falling in line with what we just looked at on the hurricane models. Now, farther to the north, again, it remains curving out to the east, to the northeast. Now, I did say that I don't expect it to make a landfall. That could be wrong if it does stray a little bit closer to Atlantic Canada and St. John's area. Maybe it moves a little bit closer there, but it should stay well to the east and southeast. But here's the latest runs of the American, GFS, and European ensemble members. So that's the latest update there. Now let's do the comparison. This is going to be the operational mean of all those ensemble members. Starting things out now. Notice how it grows. Here we are northeast of Puerto Rico. We're just due north of Puerto Rico by Sunday. Here's Dominican Republic. Here's Haiti. Here's Trinidad and Tobago. Turks and Caicos, excuse me. And the Bahamas. Pretty good agreement here between the GFS and the Euro, right on top of each other, both showing similar intensities. And then as we build it to the north, pretty good agreement here as well. And then we start to see slight deviations. There's Bermuda, both of which are to the west of Bermuda. Again, not great for Bermuda, but both are safely off to the east, off the east coast of the U.S. GFS is definitely farther to the west here. And if you remember yesterday, the European was much farther to the west, has adjusted a little farther to the east now. But could some stronger winds scrape by coastal North Carolina? It's possible. But it's looking more likely it moves right on through in between Bermuda and the eastern seaboard, and then again shoots off to the north and east here by the end of next week. So we were looking at impacts here. We were looking at Wednesday or Thursday, I believe, for it being pretty much right in between Bermuda and the eastern seaboard. So we talked a lot about Bermuda. Let's look at Bermuda's hurricane history. So there's just been so many storms that have passed near Bermuda. So I did it within 100 miles of St. George, okay? And I just did it major hurricanes, because if I did all hurricanes or all storms, it wouldn't even let me populate it. There's so many. So 36 major hurricanes on record here of Category 3 or greater that have passed within 100 miles of Bermuda. Hard to get a landfall. In fact, I believe it was, our trivia question a couple days ago. 2014, there were actually 2 hurricanes within 1 week that made actual landfall on Bermuda. So it happens. Just in 2014, it happened twice in 1 week. Before that, I don't remember what the span was, but it's rare. It's rare, I'll just say that. But likely this one may add to it if it passes within 100 miles of Bermuda. So now let's talk a little bit about the steering of Erin. It's going to be the upper level pressure patterns here that are going to be all determining on when it turns north and how far west it makes before it takes that turn north. We've got a big subtropical high. It's been driving Erin to the west its entire lifetime so far. Now, what's going to happen here is there's going to be a trough, a cold front diving in from northeast Canada. And that's going to drop south. That's going to weaken and break down this ridge that up until now, I guess this is Tuesday. So right now it is spanning across this entire area. So that's keeping everything pushed to the south. A weakness will develop here. That trough will act to kind of tug Erin north. And especially it being a stronger storm at this point, it can sense the upper level winds a little bit better. So this is the Euro rendition here. Again, we have that break in the ridge, high pressure over the eastern U.S., high pressure off to the east of Erin. And it builds to the north. It's almost, you call it an escape route. And it looks to be between Bermuda and the eastern seaboard. How about the GFS? How's it seeing it? Sees a larger breakdown of that area of high pressure, a larger area for it to turn north earlier possibly. Now, if the models say they underestimate the strength of the subtropical ridge and overestimate the influence of that trough, this can be altered, which is what the models were kind of playing with yesterday when we saw that adjustment to the west on the Euro that brought it scarily close to the eastern seaboard. It could happen. Is it favored? No. Is it likely? No. But it's a possibility. You can't rule anything out yet. And there's the escape route again with the GFS building it to the north, keeping it offshore. Now let's look back at the track history, okay? So this was initiated at 11 a.m. on Monday, so we've got several track forecasts to look back on and see how it verified. All the black lines here are the previous forecast paths. Here's the actual track. Erin has been verifying consistently south of the forecast track. And a reason for that has been the ongoing wind shear coming in out of the north and east. That's been pushing the system farther to the southwest. So it's been verifying slightly to the south. Not huge errors here at all, but it is on the southern extent, southern envelope of the forecast so far. Now here's the current forecast. You see it dipping on off towards the north and northwest. There's definitely been an adjustment farther to the south and west on the track. Not a huge jump. You see they're almost right on top of each other, but they've been tweaked a little bit. Now, how does it look for the forecast cone? Check this out. This has also been trending south and a little south and west here. Not a huge change, but you always expect changes with the forecast. That's what happens. Here's the actual path. Previous forecasts were much farther to the north and northeast, and they've been adjusting in time far to the south. Now, is it outside of the realm of possibility that we see as it moves closer to the northern leeward, that we see it adjust a little bit more and maybe threatens these islands a little bit more? It's possible. It's possible, especially if it doesn't move to the northwest, doesn't take that turn west-northwest. It's still, again, on a westward trajectory. The later it begins to turn, more of a possibility there to the east of Puerto Rico. Now, as it tracks on through to the west of Bermuda, east of the eastern seaboard, it is going to be a massive wave generator. Again, as it gains latitude, it's going to expand in size, and the wind field will expand, and that is going to kick up the ocean. And what you're seeing with the yellow shades here closer to the core to the northwest, you're looking at 20, 25, 30-foot swells well offshore. Some of the 10, 15-foot swells may be making it to coastal North Carolina and up into the Delmarva, and maybe even up into Long Island as it builds to the northeast. So that's something to keep in mind, and that will create coastal erosion in areas that are vulnerable to it. The intensity forecast, not any huge changes here. Still expected to be a Category 3, a higher-end Category 3, maxing out Tuesday afternoon. Again, that's as far out as it goes. It may be stronger after that. 125-mile-per-hour winds expected sustained by Tuesday afternoon. And we had introduced the possibility of we see an overperformance of Erin and the risk of a rapid intensification, which would be an increase of wind speeds, sustained winds of 35 miles per hour or more within 24 hours. And if you think about that and just past instances of rapid intensification, it's pretty easy to hit that if you're in a very conducive environment, which it looks like Erin will be in as we get into this weekend. So we'll have to watch out for that. So the bottom line, highly likely Erin center passes between Bermuda and the East Coast. Now, it does not mean there won't be impacts. I talked about the coastal erosion, the high swells, rough surf, rip current risk. And I mean, if it strays a little farther to the west, there could be some gusty winds along the immediate coastline. Now, subtle changes, meaning if it continues westwards for longer, we'd start to see that track probably push a little farther west. These subtle changes right now can still have big implications or impacts on the forecast going forward. We're still talking about it being between Bermuda and the East Coast almost a week from now. So there's a lot of time for things to change still. The upper level steering patterns can change or break down by that point in time. They can verify weaker or stronger than what's anticipated by models. So there are things that we have to watch here. Nothing is a slam dunk until we get much, much closer. Probably by the end of this weekend, things will look a whole lot clearer. But that's the bottom line on Erin. Let's get over to 98L now. Southern Gulf, Bay of Campeche, this thing is hauling to the northwest at 17, and it's really got its act together. There's a very favorable environment here for intensification. The problem is, or I guess the good news is that it's going to run out of runway. Okay, it's going to be moving over land within the next 24 hours, so the window of time, the window of opportunity for it to take advantage of these conditions is closing fast. But yesterday when we brought this up, 20% chance, now we're up to 50-50 odds of developing here. And the next name on the list is Fernand. How do the models see things? Pretty much due northwest. Possibly bringing squally activity or a tropical depression if it does develop, or a tropical storm, to Brownsville, Texas, or even in the far northern portions of the Gulf Coast of Mexico here in the next day and a half or so with 98L. That could become, again, the next name on the list, which is Fernand, and after that is Gabrielle. So That's the latest, folks, on this video. I know it was a long one today. Thanks for sticking around. A lot to talk about with Erin. Fun to kind of get into the overall setup, the meteorology of it. We'll be back here again tomorrow at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live. And you know what? We're going to continue it with special editions through the upcoming weekend as well, as long as Erin is still out there spinning. In the meantime, I'd love for you to find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, and also on TikTok. Now, scan that QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It is information on supplies you should have on hand, emergency numbers you might need, and a whole lot more. Another reminder, we're back here every weeknight at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.